Okay, so what we are going to do today is talk about security, but security threats and countermeasures, but then also thinking about how automation comes into play. So when we say automation, we are talking about things about different machine learning approaches, different forms of automation, including such automation, and how they come into play when we think about threats. So that is, say, if a bad actor is needing to have some network security, computer security threats, they want to do something, what are the different things they can do using automation? And then also on the defense side, what we can do using automation as well. So we'll look at both of those aspects. So, so have you heard about the Spanish prisoner scam? So this is, so I'll briefly explain what that is or what that used to be. So this is when, like say, like even like 50 years ago, or even more than that, people would receive letters where one of your family members who may be traveling abroad would send you a letter asking for money, saying that you are in a Spanish prison. So they are in a Spanish prison because they went on holiday to Spain, and you will get a letter asking for some money for them to help their release. So that used to be the scam. So through mails, through postal mails from different parties that you may know. So have you come across something similar when we think about emails or similar scams in emails?
Yes, sir. I have got few similar emails.
Yeah, but like say, so that's again, like people have transformed that into another opportunity with email. So with postal mail, they were able to send some postal mails. With emails, they can do like say thousands, hundreds of thousands of emails targeting. Like you would have gotten something like that, but still the challenge, or still the thing is, many of the times those emails are, you can spot those emails are like, okay, that's not true or something like that. But is there an opportunity with machine learning for us to make it, or for us in the sense, for the threat actor or the people who are doing the scam, to make it much more effective? If they have access to some machine learning techniques, can they make it much more effective, the scam? Like what are some of the things that they can do? So maybe think of this type of a scenario. Say, if we build an approach where, so let's think from the side of scammers. If they can sort of collect a list of emails, they can just send a bunch of random emails to sort of random recipients. You may get an email saying like, but it will be a very template kind of a message, a set fixed message that you will get. But if we can build a system where they may go into your social media profiles, or they may identify certain patterns from your Instagram post about your travels, and then they may find your connections from there and find some details about them, and you build a overall sort of picture of different people, and then you can send much more targeted emails. Say, for example, if I post something about, say, I'm traveling in this country on some social media platform, through that they may be able to find my parents somewhere, because like in various social media platforms, that's something doable, and with sort of automation and machine learning, you can even further improve that. Sort of different automation approaches, and then whatever the email that the scammer might send would be much more tailored and much more specific. It can be made much more specific. The language can be made much more specific. It doesn't have to be like very odd phrases and all that. It can be very specific to the email that you're composing, but it's not somebody personally composing, but it's automated through a system, but with a lot of knowledge to support those scams. So that is the nature of threats that we are talking about. So these are not typical threats like bulk threats or large scale threats, but these are also threats that are large in scale, but also have some aspect of automation, some aspect of machine learning, some aspect of deep learning to make them much more effective when it comes to the attack that they are performing. And the reason why these attacks become very much effective is because human behavior is very much predictable. Like you can learn about human behaviors, and particularly when humans use systems, when they use tools, you have a very predictable way. Even if you think about a very basic thing, like the reason why we have a fixed handwriting is the way that we use that tool, which is a pen or a pencil, is very much predictable. We will use it the same way every time. That's why we have the same handwriting every time we write. Likewise, any behavior that we have with our systems, how we may use computers, how we may use different systems in computers, different programs in computers, all these things are very much predictable. And when we have these predictable patterns of behavior, somebody can collect that information. So collect what are the patterns of things that people do, and then they can make various analysis on the information that they collect. They can find out about these behavioral patterns, identify certain deviations in patterns, certain things that can be exploited for vulnerabilities. So there are a number of opportunities that we would get when we are doing something like that. And as we have more technology to use, and as we have more technical tools at our hands, we are more dependent in a way in technology. The way that we behave around technology can also be very much predictable. And if we collect large number of data points, we can even predict for sort of new people. So that is what we essentially do with some of these sort of machine learning approaches, where if we are able to collect some large amount of data points, then that can be further used to make predictions for other possibilities. So with the way that we use a lot of these systems, we end up creating a lot of patterns, and then a lot of these patterns can be used to further further identify future patterns or future behaviors, and then that can be exploited as part of security threats or security means. So now the question is, who benefits from us having such technology advancements? So we can take two sides in this situation. One is the let's say bad actors and good actors, just for the sake of discussion. So we have scammers, people who are going to do harm, the people who are the threat actors. And then we have the people who are in the defense side of cybersecurity, defense side of security, who are going to prevent these attacks. So of these two parties, who benefits more from having such advancements in technology? Yeah, you can respond on chat. Any thoughts on that? Anyone else? So it's a fairly simple question. The question is, the technology advancements we have, does it benefit the bad actors, or does it benefit the good actors, or does it benefit both parties? So the reality is, when we think of these technologies, the reality is it will most likely be the bad actors who will be the first ones to use these technologies. So when we have a technology that can be used to exploit something, in most situations, it's the bad actors who normally use these things. If there's a new technology, they are most likely the ones who will be first using it. Then the countermeasure or the defense that we build to defend against that threat, that we can build using similar technologies as well. So at least most of the times the approach is that threats come first, then we go about building the defenses. So there's now a new vulnerability, then we fix that vulnerability. There's a new loophole, we fix the loophole. There's a new backdoor, we fix the backdoor. So normally that's how this sort of cat and mouse game type of thing works, because normally a threat will come, then once we know about the threat, we will build the defense for that. So in that way, the threat side of thing, people or the bad actors are likely to use the technology first. But then again, the technology itself can be used by both sides, because say if they are using some technology as part of a threat mechanism, we are able to use the same technology or similar approach as part of our countermeasure mechanism as well. So the technology can be neutral in terms of whom it benefits, but most of the time, the way that we operate in most environments, it's the threat actors who start with a new technology or who utilize a new technology first, unless we are in a very offensive security space where we may be trying out new security offenses, attacks, and then building countermeasures for that ourselves. In those environments, it may be in the sort of the good side of things, or the where technology may be utilized first. But in most scenarios, it's on the other side. The threat side is where we would see it first used, then we may see that benefiting the countermeasure side as well. So then another thing that we have when we think about security problems, when we think about computer security problems, when we think about network security problems, it is a mix between what we can see as a sort of a problem with a range of solutions that we can take. Say, for example, for almost all network security problems, one of the simplest way that we can solve a network security problem is by not being part of a network. So if we don't connect a computer to a network, we essentially don't have a network security problem. So that's one extreme. And there are certain environments that may do that. There are these things known as sort of air-gap computers, or sometimes even air-gap networks. So only within the organizations it may be network, but it's not connected to anything outside, things like that, particularly in higher security military operations, nuclear operations and things like that. They may have such environments where one of the ways to avoid any network security threats is that they are not part of the larger network. So they are not connected to anything outside. So any threat needs to physically come into the environment. So then there are other approaches to manage that. But from the network side of things, that's one of the ways that we can do. That's like a block everything kind of an approach. Then we have different approaches, different tools. So one of the things that we'll have to figure out is what is the tool that we want to use. Will this system or this tool work, this countermeasure work, or do we need something else? And how do we make the choice? And in many cases, in many sort of business environments, in many enterprise environments, those business priorities or those enterprise priorities will also have to be considered when we think about security solutions. Because sometimes, say for example, not being connected to any network may be a good security solution, but maybe not a valid or acceptable business solution, because that business may still need network connectivity. So disconnected from everything else may not be a good solution. Say for example, in the case of the pandemic now, we have a similar situation. So we have different approaches. So we can close down the country, we can close down the borders, we can have lockdowns, or if we stop everybody from moving anywhere else, we can significantly reduce or even stop the spread of new variants coming in on all that. But from an economic point of view, from an operations or sort of people's point of view, that may not be an acceptable solution, that may not be a viable solution for a country, for a people. So we'll have to think about those practicalities, those realities as well in sort of cybersecurity situations also. Then one of the things that we have to keep in mind is the security, particularly the security landscape is something that is always changing. Say, for example, the security threats that we have today, like say in 2021, may not be the same security threats we will have in 2020, in about 2 years, in 2023. Say, whatever the security threats we have today, most of them will be fixed, countermeasures will be made, say bugs will be fixed, vulnerabilities will be fixed, backdoors will be fixed. So all the system level problems, issues that lead to the security vulnerabilities will be fixed within the next year or so, once they are identified. Then in about 2 years, whatever the problems that we have now are no longer valid. We will have different problems, we will have new problems. So for those new problems, we'll have to have new solutions or new ways of combating against those new threats. So we'll have to keep on learning about these security threats and then fixing those security threats. So this is where from a security point of view, we have roles where we do penetration testings and things like that, where we try to identify the problem ourselves first before the threat is imminent. Someone is actually attacking us. We will try to see if we are vulnerable for any attacks. We will identify that through our own personnel doing penetration tests and things like that. We learn from that, and then we fix those problems. And this is one of the places where we can also think about how machine learning approaches can be useful. Again, actually, a number of you have engaged in your final year projects where you go through similar approaches as well, where you talk about how different security tools can be used in combination based on certain machine learning approaches. You learn from certain patterns and choose the tools to apply in those environments. So it's more about understanding the problems and then applying solutions. So then when you have an understandable problem, then sometimes there are opportunities for automating those things as well. So there are those approaches also. Okay. Now the question is, this is a very common question even in general automation approaches, but let's think about from cybersecurity. And I want you all to give an answer to me for this question, so this set of questions. So that is, when we think of automation approaches and when we think of security, we can do few things. One, we can let the computer learn from the available data pointers, and then learn from that, identify things and predict attacks or prevent attacks. So computer itself is learning unsupervised. So it's about unsupervised learning. Or we can have humans monitor these environments. They are able to flag threats. They are able to flag attacks more in the sense of a supervised learning environment. Or we can use a combination of these. Now the question is, in a computer security, in a network security environment, which of these approaches we can use, or what are some of the concerns when we think about these approaches? Any other thoughts? There are about 14 people, and I have only got about 3 people responding so far. So the remaining people can also respond. So yeah, there are places where automation itself is good enough. There are places very much sort of predictable environment where only automation, only automated approaches would be good enough. But then there are other circumstances where we would much prefer to have a combination of human input. Again, purely human approach is also not very practical in larger environments. So we need to have a combination. But in some places where the human intuition, like a person or a people are able to sometimes see something as a threat, which may be for the first time or something like that, they may be able to see it with their intuition, with their understanding of the environment, the organization, much better than an automated prediction would work in certain circumstances. So that is why we still have sort of a combination of approach in most situations where we have automated flagging, automated monitoring approaches, but we also still have humans intervening in many of these environments to sort of support what we get out of automation and machine learning. So then there's another question about cooperation, which is also very much of a philosophical question. So we always talk about teamwork, working together in certain situations. But then also when it comes to things like assignments and exams, we don't encourage the same. So there are situations where we like cooperations and also don't like cooperation. But when we think about security threats, when we think about cyber security, computer security, network security in these areas, do you think collaboration and knowledge sharing is important? Whether it is important or it's not a good idea to share knowledge, give and also explain why do you think so?
Hello, sir. Sir, can you explain that question again? I didn't clearly get it.
Okay, so let's think of, let's take universities in Sri Lanka. So we have, let's only take government universities in Sri Lanka. So we have about, I don't know, 15, 20 universities and similar institutions together. There may be a certain number of them. So now, if we take these organizations, there's a likelihood they will have security operations and computer security, network security operations in all of these organizations. So now the question is it a good idea to share knowledge between these different organizations? Or is it not a good idea to share knowledge between these organizations? Knowledge about their security mechanisms, what are the countermeasures they have put in place, how they have set up their security operations, all these things. Is it good to share this knowledge or not to share the knowledge? So why do you think it's not good to share the knowledge? Give it with a reasoning. Yeah, so we can actually think of it from a say. Let's think of it from a village agricultural point of view. Say, if you are doing agriculture farming in a village, it doesn't have to be village, but let's take that as an example. In a village, there are about 10 families who are engaged in farming the same crop, same type of plant you farm in your village. So now, if we take these 10 families or 10 people, all of them will have the same type of threat. That is, the same type of pests, same type of problems to those plants, diseases to those plants. All of these 10 people will have. Now let's take one of these farmers, learn about a new technique that can help them prevent that disease coming to their plant. So if they use that medicine or that chemical or whatever, fertilizer or something like that, that disease can be stopped. So now they have that knowledge. Now the question is, if they share that knowledge with the other 10 farmers, others can also benefit and they can also stop the disease spreading in their plants. But the problem is now they will also have good plants. So the overall, everybody will have to compete for the market when they are selling the things. So that's the next step. But the advantage with sharing that knowledge is, say for example, later on, if that other farmer learns about a new disease and they find a new way to stop that disease, they will also share this information. So there are reasons why we would prefer to operate alone, but because like that knowledge is also a valuable thing. But realistically, if you want to build a more robust security environment, sharing knowledge with appropriate people can be beneficial. Then other thing to remember is, particularly when we think about security vulnerabilities, when at the point when we are coming across a security vulnerability, there's a good chance others have also come to find about that security vulnerability. And some of those others could be threat actors or bad actors as well, hackers or things like that. So it's not always beneficial to hide that information or conceal that information, because that may not give us the benefit of finding a solution and solving the problem. So as you mentioned, that there are certain situations where sharing this information may be problematic because it may go into the hands of wrong people and they can do bad things. But unless we have an understanding within the security community to share knowledge about these things, we will not be able to push and improve the security practices to a higher level. A good example for this is locks. So locks as in padlocks, door locks, these locks. So they are also technically security devices. They are part of security solutions. But most of the locks that we have today, most of the locks that we have at our doors, for padlocks, most of them are very weak security locks. You can easily get through those locks if you have the right tools. Right tools and techniques, you can very easily defeat most of these locks. Even the locks that are normally sold as very secure locks, they will take a bit more time, but you can very easily defeat. One of the reasons why these locks have stayed the same for about 100 years, so if we take a very old padlock that is about 50 years ago and a new padlock you can buy from the shops, there's a good chance both of them have a very similar internal mechanism. And the reason is because knowledge sharing doesn't happen, that security community, that physical security locks and padlocks community didn't engage in any sort of knowledge sharing approaches. They didn't go into improving their security. So finding problem, fix the problem, find a new problem, fix a problem. So that's how you elevate and improve your security setup. So unless you go into this knowledge sharing and improving approach, you will stay at the very bottom. So that's what we try to avoid, and that's what we try to get by using these approaches of knowledge sharing. So we may need to find the suitable people, a community of security people, and within that community, at least we should be able to work together to inform each other and improve upon our security. So that's the sort of challenge and the opportunity we have there. Then another thing that we can actually think about is with automation and with security these days, what we have come to talk a lot is because of our behavior online and through systems, we have become vectors that criminals can use to learn about our behavior. So because we do these things in certain patterns, we can be exploited by criminals by using these approaches, these automated learning approaches. But the opportunity that we have there is, again, we can also use similar approaches to detect the threats or detect the criminals. So that's the thing that we need to remember. The same set of tools that criminals have are also available for us if we are on the defense side of things. It's just a matter of how we deploy those tools and how we can set up environments in such a manner we are able to detect these threats or defend against these threats. So that is how we would see automation in our approach, in our security approach. So I'm not going into very specific details about how we may go about automating security threats and all. For the main reason, these are very much evolving. Say, for example, what I may have discussed last year will not be valid this year, and so on. So, and these are things, particularly around security, what would be expected is you develop the habit of learning about these things on your own, because there's no point in knowing. So you can learn the basics, but beyond that, about what is current, what are the current threat landscape, what are the newer challenges and all that, you need to keep learning and keep updating Otherwise, you will not be able to effectively operate in a sort of a security environment, in a computer security, network security type environment. You need to have that capability. So there are some additional resources I have shared with these slides that you can refer to. But now we go into the actual main discussion part of today's lesson, which is about automation ethics. So there are actually about three, four scenarios here. We will discuss about one of those, or we'll discuss about few today, but then you will have to do that as a small write-up of about a half a page write-up and submit it as one of the continuous assessments. So that is one of the other continuous assessments. We will figure out the submission and when to submit and all that later. So this one, I expect you all to provide me an answer. Like how many are there? There are about 14, 15. Let's do this. So is everybody having, I hope you have downloaded the slides. So now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to create a number of breakout groups. So there will be about 3 or 4 of you in a group. You will discuss about this activity one for about 5 minutes. And end of 5 minutes, you'll have to talk about that. Okay. So now you can go and you will be invited to join all groups. So you can join the groups. Still nobody has joined the groups. So are you able to join the breakout rooms? So there's one person.
No, sir. When I click that invitation, it redirect back to the main room.
Are you on a mobile device or?
No.
Okay. Let's try again. Okay, I think something is wrong with the. It's not letting that happen. So okay, we'll go without that. So just think about this and give your responses. So the situation is. So let's let's think about the situation for a bit. Uh, so the situation that we have is so there's a company and they are thinking that their employees are leading to sort of security exploits, the computers getting infected um, because they use their private emails and other things at work, visiting social media platforms and all. So they propose a mechanism whereby they are going to monitor all your private communications, your emails and social media that you do through your work computers. So what are your thoughts on that, and what would you say if for such a proposal? So you can think from security, you can think from privacy, so you can think from those aspects. And what are some of your thoughts around this proposal? So what are some of your thoughts about this? Yeah. So in this case, say if we think about security and privacy, people using private emails and private social media is problem, because if we have our own organizational email server or something, that is something that we can monitor. Whereas if somebody uses Gmail, we may not have much control over monitoring those things. So we cannot place any sort of controls there. So preventing that private access is acceptable. It's important. But on the other side, monitoring the private communication can be problematic from a privacy point of view. So how do you do is one thing, but then also like monitoring the private communication may not be acceptable from a privacy point of view, because I may not want my personal communications known to my organization. I may not, but what they can say is, like as many of you have suggested, that companies can put in place restrictions that you are not able to use these private communications in your organizational devices. They can have policies, they can block through firewalls and things like that, so you're not able to access social media. So that they can do. So they can do blocking, because it's still the company computer, so they can make those restrictions. But them expecting to monitor your social media or personal communications may be a bit too much. So that is the sort of balance that we need to find, because like from a very security point of view, we doing something very much is good, but from a people's point of view, people may not be willing to do that. Say monitoring the private communication is also a good thing. If we can do that, we can all stop everything, but that's not very acceptable for many people. So we have to find the balance between that. So that's the thing that we can think of. So in such a scenario, so this is the type of sort of a discussion or like a response that I would expect for these activities. So we'll briefly go through these, and then what you can do is you can write up on these about half a page, and then I mean, like I'll let you know once we have LMS available. I'll upload this and I'll inform about how to submit and all that. So the second one is a slight variation of the first one. We are now instead of monitoring the private communications in person, now we have a sort of a machine learning approach that is going to monitor private communication. So what are some of the concerns there? Third one is about collecting user behavioral data from an operating system. So again, what are some of the concerns from security and privacy there? So because like again, collecting behavioral data can be useful as a security countermeasure, but that information can also be problematic from a privacy, and also if it falls into the hands of wrong people, can also lead to security threats. So we can think about those. And the last one is about making predictions. Again, predictions, sort of these automation systems will make certain predictions, and what type of actions that we can take based on predictions. Let's take, for example, like this example, let's take our students, right? We do some analysis of behaviors of all the ICT students, and we sort of conclude like networking students are most likely to launch a network security attack in our labs. So can we prevent networking students from using the labs? So it is that type of a question. So again, these are sort of partly philosophical, partly security, partly privacy type questions. So you can think of these scenarios and make certain observation about that. So that's mainly about it for the main discussion for the day. And as I said, the activities can be done as continuous assessments and submitted later on. Then next week, you will actually have a practical session on security, and it will be done by Mr. Surat. He's the lecturer who is also doing the advanced topics in networking. Networks. He will do the practicals for network security as well. So next week he'll do a practical, and the week after I'll do a lecture, and for about a few weeks we will alternate between lectures and practicals like that. So are there any questions on any of these things? About the practicals or about any of these things?
So practicals are done in online method. Oh.
Yeah, for now we are thinking online. We will most likely do that. The reason why Mr. Surat is going to do the practicals is because he is actually a Cisco. He has a Cisco trainer with access to the Cisco platforms. So he normally does the practicals online directly. So he's actually doing the similar thing for the third year subjects as well. So he'll do the same thing for us as well. So he'll do about 3-4 practicals. Or he will inform you about the exact nature of how he will conduct the practicals, but it will be online. Because we were told that mainly this period, mainly to do the practicals for the third year subjects, which we don't have any practicals to do in this third year subjects. So I mean, like, I think multimedia students are doing practicals. Others, I don't think have many practicals yet. So if there's anything, it will be scheduled, I suppose, for our fourth year subjects. So I don't know whether we will continue online for the lectures or whether we can start lectures also in person. That's also not very well known because not all students are here yet. I think other departments, many students are here. For ICT, I don't think that's the case. Anything else? So if there's nothing else, we may conclude for today. And given even if LMS is there or not, we will also post the details about the practicals on the WhatsApp group as well, so you can find it from there. So that's what will be for next week. And once we have LMS back, I'll post the information about how to submit this particular assignment part. All right. So thank you for joining. And again, for the lecture videos, I will. So again, if LMS is not available, you can also find it on YouTube. All right. So thank you and bye.